Nintendo is officially killing physical media, guys. I know the headline sounds a little bit outrageous, but some third-party games for the Switch 2 have started popping up for pre-order in Japan, and the trend is clear. Most of these aren't coming on full cartridges anymore. You're not going to get the game on the little Switch disc. It's going to be a download.
Well, so far so disappointing. Pre-orders for Nintendo Switch 2 consoles, games, and accessories opened in North America a couple of days ago, and I think we all saw this coming, mainly because I've talked about it in length already, but the launch window for Nintendo Switch 2 is looking absolutely grim in terms of proper physical releases.
But with Japan doing pre-orders already, this is being talked about today. The bad thing is like, okay, you gotta have this game key card. It's just like any other Switch 2 cartridge. You put it in your system, it's gonna download the game, because there's no game content on it. It's gonna download the game, you need an internet connection. It's gonna download the game, the full game download. There's no content on that thing. Every time you want to play that game download, you need that game key card.
Now the problem here, for anybody that's not picking up what I'm putting down, is from a preservation perspective. If down the road servers go down for any system, which they do, whether it be 10 years, maybe even 20 years if you're really lucky, those cards become useless. You can stick a card in, and if you can't download the rest of the game anymore because the server isn't available, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a bad time.
Let's be blunt here. Game keycards are disappointing, and misses the point of owning physical games. If you prefer physical media, then in just a decade, your access to download these games may no longer be possible. And if you prefer digital games, then the inconvenience of holding a physical cartridge to play that game makes it too much of a hassle to keep. This is not to say there is zero use for game keycards, but the target market for these aren't as strong as the other two options. But the question is, why did Nintendo do this? And why are third-party developers so insistent on using it? Before we can answer that, we'll need a bit of context. Cartridges are known to be more expensive to produce than Blu-ray disc. For example, back in 2019, it was known that Switch 1 32GB carts are 60% more expensive than the 50GB Blu-ray disc. We do not know the exact pricing, but we can make an educated guess. For now, we'll put a pin on that. We can also see examples of download codes being used. Games such as LA Noire and NBA 2K18 have been notorious examples of Switch 1 games using these systems. And we know the reason why, and it's because the 8GB options for the Switch 1 carts were the same price as the 50GB options on the PS4 and Xbox One. There was even a term for these games that cost more money on Switch 1 because of the cartridge cost. These were called the Switch tax. Now, over time, the Switch tax became less predominant, as Switch 1 cartridges got cheaper to make with time, making it more of a reasonable price to developers. We can even see this with micro SD cards back in 2017 costing around 20 to 30 Australian dollars, which is in comparison to American currency, that is 12 to $20 American dollars. In comparison to 2025, we can see a drastic reduction to these prices as the current 32GB micro SD card model cost 8 to 15 Australian dollars, which is 5 to 10 USD. Now, there are no 64GB micro SD express cards to have a direct comparison with in price, but we can assume based on percentages from the 128GB Switch 1 SD card model with the Switch 2's 128GB Express model, there is a 152% price increase. Now, there is a good chance that the price increase won't be as drastic when buying in bulk, but at the very least, this is likely a 100% a price increase for both Nintendo and third-party developers in cartridge space alone. This is why Nintendo created the game keycards, as they know developers will not go through with these prices. And there is a current rumor being spread around with decent evidence backing it up that there is only 2 physical gigabyte options for developers to choose from, one being 8GB or 64GB with 0 in between. This is likely due to the prices of a 32GB card and a 64GB card being close enough. Now, this is likely worth it in the long run, but this is going to suck for at least for the first couple of years of the Switch 2. We can assume because of the cost of the cartridges though, it isn't viable to make a game price less than 60 USD, otherwise profits simply won't be made. If you look at almost every single Switch 2 game keycard game, they are all priced traditionally or cheaper than the value you expect them to be, which simply isn't possible on the Switch 2 cards. Now, after all of that information, do I agree with Nintendo's approach? Surprisingly, no. But to get to that explanation, first I need to provide some examples. Let's look at the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles for comparison. These days, Blu-ray discs aren't fast enough to play games through it. So instead, they decided to make the disc install the games onto the system before playing it. There is no online download, it's just the physical information on the disc being imported to the console to play it on a solid-state drive instead. I say this because I think Nintendo's biggest flaw of this generation was trying to make the Switch 2 a plug-and-play system. What do I mean by that? I meant that Nintendo wants you as a consumer to buy a Switch 2 game, and as soon as you put it into the system, it works immediately. On paper, that's a good experience. In execution, game keycards already contradict it. So here is my solution to fix this, if it's possible. Game in-store cards. This solution is like an in-between of a standard Switch 2 game card and a Switch 2 game key card. We already know Switch 1 cartridges are possible to connect with Switch 2 systems, which means that a cheaper alternative solution is already possible for developers. And on top of that, you can get even larger spaces available. The game in-store cards would be exactly how PlayStation and Xbox handles their Blu-ray disc. The game in-store card isn't meant to be fast. It just needs to hold the information of the game and import the data on that game into the Switch 2. Let's look at the pros and cons between the system. For the pros, you get to keep the physical media alive. They are cheaper to produce as the speeds aren't important, and it's just a substantially better solution than the game key cards. Now with the cons, they take a while to install onto the system device, to which I would argue doesn't really matter because game keycards force you to install it in the first place. Therefore, the plug-and-play system doesn't really work in the first place. But by far the biggest issue with the system is that they will eventually overtake the system's hardware space, which admittedly isn't a lot. 256 gigabytes for a Switch 2 is actually quite small, especially when you'll start seeing 64 and 70 and 80 gigabyte games more often on the system. So what do you think? Should Nintendo consider making a game install card system like the one I suggested? Is it even possible? Would you buy it? This is just my take on everything, but if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. And if you didn't, I would appreciate some feedback. Thank you for watching, and have a good afternoon.